Good evening, BookTube, and good evening, Patreon. I am so happy to be able to sit down properly and chat with all of you, but especially to my patrons. The last piece that I put up was about getting back into the swing of things, because sometimes it can be really difficult to reset routines, especially when you've had so many setbacks. But thanks again to Elaine, especially, not only for the technology, but also some very friendly, kind counsel along the way. I think I'm ready, and we'll be able to share some lovely readings from the upcoming book with all of you shortly. And I think I'll even go back and do a reading as well from Karaskija. So, all good things in time, definitely. But the hardest part was getting over the insecurity, the doubt, and especially the struggle at the beginning of this year meant that I was working through a lot of brain stuff. And maybe that came through, I think, a little bit in my last piece when, I don't know if I overshared, but I did share a little bit more than I intended to when talking about how important two of the books that are publishing this year are for me and have been for me. It's a strange phenomenon. So today, right now, in this moment, I'm making a piece directed especially at my patrons. Thank you for that. It is going to be public, though, even though I am saying this in thanks to my patrons, because I want to share some of the underlying struggle for other writers who might be in my position. It is a strange, strange world in this moment. And I think the more we talk about it openly, the easier it will be to navigate. So, to be very clear, I would not have been able to get through the last few months if not for my patrons. You have been my rock. You have been my support, not just in this season, but in so many seasons of self-doubt, as I've been trying to work through an industry that I know full well is not a meritocracy, that is arbitrary, that requires so many of us to do so much work without payment, and maybe even without expectation of payment for quite some time, while outside of the industry of publishing, quite a few people have very different expectations of what publishing is and what it means. And it's difficult because I love history. I love approaches to history that allow us to reframe the present and to get out of the mindset that the present is extraordinarily different, that everything right now is, well, in one way it's always unique. Can't help but be unique in the sense that we are moving in one direction chronologically, I think. The sci-fi part of me is already scrambling for alternatives. But there is strength in remembering that human beings and human behavior have not much changed. Not over the last few decades, not over the last few centuries or eons. We find new manifestations of certain cyclical behaviors and phenomena, including bubbles, industry bubbles especially. So in past periods, writers have struggled. And yet, in past periods, there has also been a little bit of an easier path for making money in certain forms of writing that right now are not able to pay out in a way that it all matches living expenses for most, and certainly does not even come close to matching the amount of work that goes into everything we do as writers, as editors, as proofreaders and slush readers, as agents. I haven't shared this yet, I think, but as I come up to self-publishing a book that means a lot to me, Children of Doro, very much a piece into which I poured a very proactive look at my humanist philosophy. I'll talk more about that in another episode. I'm hesitating to keep myself from waxing poetic about it here. I felt so ashamed when it didn't get picked up by the majors, despite very kind, glowing comments about how the world building was excellent and the writing was very good, and clearly the author is quite intelligent, and they look forward to seeing something else from me in the future, etc., etc. I felt so ashamed for having wasted my agent's time. And I know she would say that that's not at all the case, but she also doesn't get paid until there's an actual sale. So there's a sense that I had let somebody else down by not being good enough. And if there was something about my work that I could have changed to have been good enough to have helped not just myself but others in the industry, I would have liked to have been able to do that. But I think it really came to just me not being a person who was marketable. And that's hard. That's really hard to acknowledge, that there's just might be something about you as a person that just doesn't seem like something that a press can invest in. That's tough. Not that everything was closed. Again, I now have to write the next piece, which is glibly called Thucydides in Space, because it's, again, leaning into my strengths in terms of loving history, loving historiography, and feeling very strongly that Thucydides, his account of the Peloponnesian War, there are so many echoes, so many resonance points inside that volume with what is happening today, because again, humans don't change, human behavior doesn't change. So I have a really interesting adventure planned, partially written, still have to finish that draft. So I'll move forward, but the shame is what I want to talk about, and the other mixed feelings, the doubt, the hesitation. I don't know if any of you follow Rita Chang Eppig, but her latest newsletter also had a really great piece about this question of what it would mean to stop writing, and a very thoughtful piece. She's doing wonderfully. She has, I hope you can't hear the moto in the back because I'm not going to restart this piece, but there's a motorcycle tearing down my highway. Okay, it's past now, I hope. I, of course, get distracted by background noises, even if you don't. But the piece that she had written resonates so much with what I so often feel. I sometimes have people saying, oh, no, you're a writer, that's what you're destined to do, and I do not believe in destiny at all. Writing is something that absolutely has been a part of my life, a deep part of my life, but I'm also someone who's walked away before from deep parts of my identity. When I had to leave academia in the 5th year of my PhD program, when I had written my dissertation twice and had gone through one of the most humiliating, excruciating experiences with the committee, one of whom had not read my dissertation. She had also been backlogged, obviously, but had had the audacity to say, despite not having read my dissertation, that I was probably rushing and that I was probably trying to go too fast to the program, but she hadn't even read the work. Just the arbitrary nature of so much in so many of our industries decides whether we succeed or fail. Painful. But I understood sunk cost fallacy then, and I understand sunk cost fallacy now. So I live with that doubt. I live with that question, am I good enough? And not even the question of am I good, am I capable of enduring the uncertainty, the arbitrary nature of the business long enough to hope that maybe one day there will be a better result? I don't know the answer to that. I struggle with the answer to that all the time. And I especially struggle with it because where I live and how I live now, I get to be present more with completely different ways of living. I have so many friends who struggle in immense ways that keep them from being able to have creative lives. And that's one of the reasons I absolutely adore my agent and the work that she does, because she also is present with people and communities that don't have the same space, time, opportunity because of other injustices. That's why, again, there was a sense of shame. And apologies too in the background, there's now whistling, so I hope you're not hearing the whistling, but if you are, And if you also have those little tiny quirks that I do with background noises, mea culpa. But that shame, that uncertainty, that question of audacity to do something, to aspire to something, to try to be more, to try to share something, and to continue to believe in the value of your work when all around you, you are seeing the world filled with injustices, and more immediate injustices. I'll give you an example. This is Semana Santa, it's Holy Week here. A lot of my street friends are actually Jehovah's Witnesses, so a little bit different. I'll talk sometime in the future about how Jehovah's Witnesses definitely have an alignment with people in poverty that is quite interesting and I think quite logical, but that's another day, another topic. There are also a lot of Venezuelans among my street friends, and I have been touching base with them about whether they were going back home by bus for Semana Santa to deliver things in person, often diapers, medicine, tins of meat, things that are not easily accessible, or if they would just be sending money. And I heard such stories, because there are always such stories. They're normalized for me. Nothing really shocks me or anyone else here because it's normal, it's life. It's la vuelta, is what we say here, which is not the same thing as la vida. La vida is life in Spanish, but la vuelta is like the journey. And la vuelta es fuerte, it's very tough. So one of my friends here is a father who works hard to be able to support his family by begging on the street, and concerned right now because his youngest is a year old and she's very skinny, so they are doing what they can to keep her plump with what they have. He has family as well back in Venezuela, living on a finca, and I made the silly mistake of saying, oh, well, that's good. At least on a finca, they've got trees filled with fruit, and maybe you can keep chickens and goats. And he said again, very calmly and nonchalant, because it's normal here, no, they can't keep chickens and goats because people keep coming by and stealing them and slaughtering them. And the fruit from the trees is stolen too, and the seeds from the ground for crops are stolen. So it can be very difficult. Right now in Venezuela, the average monthly income minimum salary is $6 US. So my point is, I hold all of that in contrast, in tension with the fact that I am pursuing work in a very affluent way, even though there's not really much money attached to it. And the self-importance that can often come from people working in creative industries, we get consumed in that sense. Oh, I need to make a sale, or why hasn't this publication accepted me? Why haven't I been accepted by the presses? And then to move in the streets in everyday life and see how many people do not even have the beginning of a chance at anything else because they are working to make sure their 1-year-old doesn't starve. It's very hard to maintain the ego necessary to keep going with creative practice, and yet I know that there are opportunities through creative practice to improve the world collaboratively in a way that can uplift others. So it's just that delicate balancing act. And that's what I'm aspiring toward, is that balancing act of sustaining the illusion of importance to the work that I do for as long as I can. All of which, again, is to say, I wouldn't be able to do that if not for my patrons. I went through some struggles at the beginning of this year. One of them related to a significant loss of income. That was at the end of December. And at the same time, in January and February, a family medical crisis fell into my lap. And that was the help that I received from all of you was phenomenal. You made it possible for me to help a family, and it actually worked. Cesar and his boys actually have a home that is theirs, that no one can take away from them. They won't be kicked out and live under a bridge again. Cesar's back at work, fully recovered, and his son is fully recovered too from pneumonia, double pneumonia, that at one particular point the doctors were hastening towards double lung transplant because it was so severe. He lived to see his 5th birthday because of you. because I was here as well, and you were able to help me with all of that. So in so many ways, you allow me to work on that balance and to live the life that I want to with integrity while pursuing creative labor. So I am making this public because I do also very much want other people who are in doubt, who are questioning, who are struggling, to know you're not alone. I'm not going to provide platitudes. It is painful, it is hard, and you're going to feel many different things. I felt a lethargy, a sense of profound doubt, especially when I was doing revisions for my latest novel, which will begin out in May. I felt deflated. Is this it? This is the best I can do, and I've worked so hard, but I'm not going to get anything out of it in any kind of bigger way that would allow me to help others the way that I want to. I wanted so much to be the kind of person who could get a platform that I could share, and instead the platform I have is the one I will share, and it might not be much. It is made possible by you, and I am so thankful for that, and I will do everything I can to make that platform worthwhile with everything I write, with everything I do. But I just wanted to say before we go on to the other pieces, the readings from my book, the way I talk about more aspects of the Brothers Karamazov. I think I'm going to read from the Brothers Karamazov at certain points too. I think it's necessary. And of course, to talk about other work along the way. I will do that. I will continue to lean into all of that next. But I just wanted to start with the deepest of thanks to all of you who have supported me, and with a sense of solidarity to others who have doubt, who have questions, who aren't sure about how to live with integrity in an industry that has fallen apart the way that the industry often does in cycles 100%, but in a way that, because of the nature of the internet, we are all watching play out and seeing for the absurdity that it is in a way that might not have been available to other generations. So I think we see the ruse a little bit more, we just don't know what to do about it. We'll figure that out together. Thank you again. Biggest of hugs from afar. Be well, be kind. Seek justice where you can.